In this video, I'm going to talk about the critical flow path or the path of critical flow. Most projects do not have a critical path. In fact, I don't even really believe a critical path is a real thing, but a critical flow path is, and I'm going to show you that in this video. We hear about critical path all the time, and we hear it in construction. We're like, oh my gosh, those are such cool words. Critical path, critical path, critical path. But it's one of the biggest lies in construction, and I'm going to show you that right now. So stay with us. So in a construction schedule, and I'm going to mark with black marker, just typical activities, right? In a construction schedule, and specifically with traditional CPM, you'll create sequences and you'll link that to a work breakdown structure and you'll get an overall total project duration, but the logic is very complex and the schedule gets very, very, very long. What the schedule will then do is it will do a forward and backward pass, it will identify your longest path, and it will identify what's called a critical path. But here's the problem. There was and let me just use an example for this. There was a project that was in trouble about 2/3 of the way through. And a really proficient scheduler and I went to the project site and we organized their schedule in a time by location format. And once we knew what their main zones were, because they did have zones in the actual CPM schedule, what we found was that they had sequences and it was going okay for the first 2/3 part of the project, but then at the end, it started to do something like this, right? It started to like really stack here at the end. Forgive my sketch, but it really stacked at the end. So if you were looking at this objectively, you would say, okay, not a bad pace at the beginning of the project, but at the end, they had this incline. And then you ask yourself, well, hold on a minute. These zones that were a part of their work breakdown structure all had the same amount of work. In fact, some of them were more complex. You had the same trade partners. What is going on here? Yes, there's a certain amount of efficiency that happens here at the end, but not that much. And what we realized here, and I'll mark this with orange, is that they had pretty good trade flow, and then they started to stack literally to where the trades were on top of each other vertically. And these items at the end were just the finish items for the project. So they were literally, with their schedule logic, expecting the trades to be in like 8, 9, 10 areas all at once, okay? Their critical path was basically weaving through, like a critical path will typically do, through the project and basically saying, okay, we're on time, we have 0 days, total project flow, okay? So everybody thought, oh my gosh, this schedule, we're beautiful. We're 0 days project flow, we're great. Now, 2/3 of the way through, like I said, they started to have a problem, and that's because you started to see the stacking. And now you have the bungee effect, which is when you stack or burden trades, it's going to extend the duration instead of shorten it, okay? So here's the rub. They were never, ever, ever, ever going to finish here, even though the computer said they were on schedule and had 0 days total project float. They were going to finish here. So the schedule was lying to them. And I want you to know this isn't just my opinion. There was a project of the same size and magnitude that got into this trouble and did not do what I'm about to tell you, and they got into a massive problem. They finished 4.5 months late. Half of the team quit. They didn't get any work with that owner again, and they were minus $2.3 million from a profit standpoint. But what we did when we saw this problem is we immediately realized that the schedule was lying to the team and saying they were going to finish here, but because of how they were doing work, they were actually going to finish much later. So what do you do in a scenario like this? Well, let me tell you. We said, hey, what if in these zones you keep your trades consistent throughout, right? where you have really good diagonal trade flow, what would it take to finish this building and still hit on time? And what we found out was we would have to switch one portion of the building to and basically split the crews in half and say, hey, this one set of crews will work in this area, and the other crews broken out will work in the other area. And that was possible because in this scenario they had large batched crews. And we aligned material procurement to both of these general phases, and we allowed the trades to keep their diagonal rhythm and to target a proper end date for their substantial completion. What we did is we put this into a takt plan and issued a $0 change order to all the trade partners, aligned procurement, and got owner buy-in, and everybody started to follow the rhythm. On a flow consistent, on a flow consistently throughout. And they finished a week early. Now, let me tell you what would have happened up here if they didn't follow our advice, okay? If they didn't right-size the crews, if they didn't break out these into two areas, what they were doing is they were missing all of their dates, and they would have slipped well behind schedule by at least 3 months. We know this because this is historically what always happens, and there was and I love that this, well, I don't love that it happened to the bad job, but I love that it happened at this time if it was going to happen at all, because it allowed people to see what happens when you stay on a rhythm versus when you don't. The other project, like I said, they started rushing and pushing and working overtime and panicking, which put them into a productivity spiral, and they finished much later than what they had originally thought, okay? So when you are analyzing your CPM schedule the traditional way, and if you don't have trade flow in the diagonal, then everything that this critical path tells you is a bold-faced lie. It's telling you you're going to finish here, but you won't. You're going to finish much later, and you're going to find the problem about 2/3 of the way through. That's why every project that uses traditional CPM, oh, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. You know, like let's pretend the PX is talking to the owner. I'm good, I think I'm okay. Oh, it's tight. Oh, I think I need to check into the project. Oh, crap, we're in a crash landing. That's why the last 2/3 of all CPM schedules are a crash landing. It's because they dissolve logic, they stack trades, they burden trades, and it will bungee you out and finish you later. The real way to do it is to actually finish in a flow. Now, I told you all that so that I could tell you this. When you do scheduling properly, you do it in a time by location format. And you will see the wagons inside your takt plan or your activities, and you will see them stagger to where the start dates are on a stagger and the end dates are on a stagger. So let's say this has zones 1, 2, and 3, right? So you have a nice stagger on the front, nice stagger on the back. What this creates is a shape, which I've talked about in other videos. And this shape is a phase. So let me go ahead and draw this real quick, okay? This phase is identified by the sequence in the horizontal, your line of balance in the diagonal, your buffer at the end based on risks, however many risks you have inside this phase need to be covered by buffers at the end of the phase. That will then allow you to target what's called your phase milestone that you can track to. And every phase, it's the best practice for me to pull plan about 3 months ahead of time, and before any activity about 3 weeks to do what's called a quality pre-install meeting, okay? So this is the overall structure. You will never, ever, ever have a phase with a train that doesn't need a proper sequence and a line of balance, meaning a speed of that stagger. So when we're doing construction scheduling and you have your start date, right, you will have phases that are all tied together throughout the project, going their own speeds with their own sequences, and it will help you identify your substantial completion date because they're all tied together and it gives you your proper speed. So you do not have a critical path because, as we've shown in previous sketches, that's just a projection. It always changes. It's not accurate. and it's not really how construction works. Phases work together with the train moving through your zones and time ticking by to the left. So if there's a delay anywhere inside of this phase, it's going to delay the entire phase. It's not just going to delay that activity on some imaginary critical path. If you have a delay here, it's going to delay and cascade all the way through that phase. So your path of critical flow, or your critical flow path, runs through these sequences, and it runs through your overall plan to where you can identify your correct longest path all the way to the end of your schedule. Okay? So sequence, interdependence tie. Sequence, line of balance, buffer, interdependence tie. Sequence, line of balance, interdependence tie. Sequence, line of balance, buffer, interdependence tie. Sequence, line of balance, buffer, and then the tie to the end date. So everything on a path of critical flow will be this formula. It will be the sequence plus your line of balance plus your buffer plus your, and I'll just put tie here at the end. And so what that means is the sequence of the phase, your line of balance, the buffer at the end, and the tie to another phase. That's always going to be your building blocks for your path of critical flow. So you won't see, like I did in the other sketch, some critical flow path that's like all over the place on your schedule. That's wrong. It will always be a beautiful line with this basic shape as a component that's running from the start to the end. This is now your longest path. Okay? And the reason a critical flow path is accurate is because it has the sequence and the line of balance and the buffer and the tie. So it has all four critical components. A critical path only has the sequence and the tie. But if you're missing the line of balance, oh my gosh, this is a good video. If you're missing the line of balance and you're missing the buffer, you do not have an accurate schedule. You've got to have those other pieces. So always remember critical flow path, or path of critical flow. So this flow piece is the key. This flow piece is the key. Your line of balance shows the speed of how fast your trades are going in a flow. Your buffers allow you to stay in flow. Okay, so we do not have critical paths in construction, we have critical flow paths. Now, what you're probably asking me is, hey, what happens, J Money, if we have a delay? Okay, fair point. Let's say that you have a delay here, okay, and let's say that this is now moved over to the right. Let's say that this phase is now showing a little bit later, and everything is pushed over here to the right. Your scheduling professionals, your superintendent, your PM, with the owners can verify the sequence, the speed, the tie, the sequence, the speed, and the tie to say, hey, is this a legitimate delay? And when are we really going to finish? The great thing about this, and I'm going to go ahead and draw it in green, sorry for my different colors, but when you're recovering from a delay, if you look at one of our other videos, which I'll actually link you to, you can actually speed up and get different lines of balance swinging in the more vertical position without hurting trade partners, and try to recover this at the end because you're using the takt production system. So we do not ever just have a critical path. It's always a critical flow path. It's always built together with the sequence, line of balance, buffer, and the tie. This is how you calculate it. It's all verifiable. It's all been researched. It's all studied. And we have it on the taktguide.com website. And eventually, probably at least within 6 months, there will be definable criteria to validate and to analyze a takt schedule in the court of law. Reasonable standards that you can follow. So this is how you identify your path of critical flow, or your critical flow path, whichever term that you want to use to describe that. And the purpose is to identify the overall total project duration, to know what critical ties really need to be maintained to know when you might push behind schedule and to also analyze if you can recover and to justify delays or time extensions. You will want to know all about this. If you need any help, let us know. Pick up our takt planning book, which is out. It's absolutely amazing. It will give you the criteria right there in the book. Or if you need help with this, call us. We do training, consulting, and project support for numerous clients with much success. Put us in if you ever need help. I hope you've enjoyed this video. On we go.